Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, May 10, 2024. The United Nations General Assembly votes overwhelmingly to support full membership for Palestinians, who are now a non-member observer state. The United States and Israel vote no. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu doubles down on what he says is the need for the Israeli military to eradicate Hamas fighters in the city of Rafah in Gaza, despite President Joe Biden's warning that would lead to the U.S. restricting weapons shipments to Israel. And a White House spokesperson, John Kirby, is asked how the U.S. can continue both supporting eliminating the Hamas threat, but not going into Rafah. U.S. House Majority Leader Steve Scalise asked about an effort from another House Republican to impeach President Biden for conditioning aid to Israel, as the same premise as the first impeachment of former President Trump for conditioning aid to Ukraine. House Judiciary Committee holding a field hearing in Arizona on immigration and border security one day after the Biden administration proposes a rule to let immigration officials more quickly identify and deport migrants who are not eligible for asylum. White House National Economic Council Chair Lael Brainard talking about the president's plans, if he wins re-election, to roll back parts of the 2017 Trump tax cuts when they expire next year. Senate passes a 5-year FAA reauthorization bill after vigorous opposition from the senators from Virginia, opposing adding more flights at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. And ahead of Mother's Day, 2 female members of Congress, 1 Democrat, 1 Republican, talking about issues important to moms. Story from the Washington Post. The United Nations General Assembly voted to grant the observer state of Palestine new rights and privileges Friday and called on members of the UN Security Council to reconsider its bid to become a full UN member state, a resolution the United States vetoed April 18th. The 193-member world body approved the resolution 143-9 with 25 abstentions. Palestine became a non-member observer state to the UN in 2012. That was from the Washington Post. Those 9 no votes today were from the United States, Israel, Argentina, the Czech Republic, Hungary, Micronesia, Nauru, Palau, and Papua New Guinea. Ahead of the vote, some statements from the Palestinian ambassador and the Israeli ambassador to the UN. First, and Palestinian ambassador Riyad Mansour.
Your vote today, of course, says a lot about your solidarity with Palestine, but also about who you are and what you stand for. It matters, and I know an overwhelming majority of you will stand again with the Palestinian people in their hour of need, and you will stand for just and lasting peace for the benefit of all. In simple words, voting yes is the right thing to do. And I can assure you, you and your country for years to come will be proud to have stood for freedom, justice, and peace in this darkest hour. As everyone is saying, free Palestine, and peace for all. And I repeat, free Palestine, and vote yes for the resolution, and I thank you so much.
The Palestinian ambassador to the United Nations, Riyad Mansour, at today's UN General Assembly meeting in New York City. The Israeli ambassador, Gilad Erdan, called for a no vote on the resolution.
Today's destructive vote is not only opening the UN's doors to the terror-supporting Palestinian Authority. If it was, then it would be bad enough. But as you all know, the Palestinian Authority does not even have control of its own territory. Do you know who controls Gaza? You probably have forgotten, because in all of your resolutions here since October 7th, you have failed to even call them out by name. So I'll remind you, it's the terrorists of Hamas. But Hamas doesn't only control Gaza. Hamas has also taken over Palestinian neighborhoods, Palestinian villages in Judea and Samaria, what you call the West Bank. In every poll, Hamas today is predicted to win Palestinian elections, if they ever happen. So today, the General Assembly is not only about to grant the rights of a state to the Palestinian Terror Authority. Today you are also about to grant privileges and rights to the future terror state of Hamas. You have opened up the United Nations to modern-day Nazis, to genocidal jihadists committed to establishing an Islamic state across Israel and the region, murdering every Jewish man, woman, and child. It makes me sick.
Israeli ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, at the UN General Assembly meeting today. He also accused the UN of shredding the UN Charter and physically put pieces of paper in a portable shredder as a visual. Reuters reports that this resolution that passed does not give the Palestinians full UN membership, but simply recognizes them as qualified to join, and it recommends that the Security Council reconsider the matter favorably. And also from the article, while the General Assembly alone cannot grant full UN membership, the draft resolution on Friday will give the Palestinians some additional rights and privileges from September 2024, like a seat among the UN members in the Assembly Hall, but will not be granted a vote in the body. That was from Reuters. From ABC News, as Israel's offensive on Rafah intensifies, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees estimates that around 110,000 people have fled Rafah looking for safety. UNRWA, the agency, said in a statement Friday the only hope is an immediate ceasefire. Ceasefire negotiations between Hamas and Israel are on pause, with no negotiations currently happening, according to an Israeli source familiar with the talks. Some of the reporting from ABC News. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in an interview with Philip McGraw, known professionally as Dr. Phil, asked about President Biden's recent statements on Rafah and U.S. weapons shipments.
There was a headline in an American newspaper today that said "betrayed," and it had a picture of President Biden and a picture of you. And it talked about President Biden saying he was not going to release armament that was committed, 1,800, 2,000-pound bombs, 1,700, 500-pound bombs, if in fact you went into Rafah. And so the headline was betrayed. And then in an interview on CNN, he said, I'm not going to do that because they're using these bombs to, quote, go after population centers. It's just wrong. And I don't know if that's what he meant to say or not say, but you're not using bombs to go after population centers. You're using bombs to go after Hamas.
That's right. Who's hiding.
Sometimes they're hiding in population centers.
But we are doing everything we can to let the people leave, and with amazing efforts. But I think also that this is precision weapons. So, in fact, if you want to avoid civilian casualties, you need these weapons rather than imprecise weaponry. But I think beyond that, look, I've known Joe Biden for many years, 40 years and more. We often had our agreements, but we've had our disagreements. We've been able to overcome them. I hope we can overcome them now, but we will do what we have to do to protect our country, and that means protect our future. And that means we will defeat Hamas, including in Rafah. We have no other choice.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, interviewed by Philip McGraw, also known as the talk show host Dr. Phil, part of an hour-long interview in Israel that he posted late Thursday night. John Kirby, White House National Security Communications Advisor, held an online audio news conference today talking about Rafah and weapon shipments and Hamas.
A couple of days ago, I asked you if the United States still backs Israel's intention to eliminate the terrorist threat posed by Hamas. And you said yes, unequivocally. And then the president came out and said, if Israel goes into Rafah, that's where the line is, and that the U.S. will stop providing certain weapons. How can both things be true? In what way does the U.S. support Israel's intention to go after Hamas, and how are they supposed to do that if you've got the 4 battalions they need to go after in Rafah?
That's a great question, Jackie, and I'm really glad you asked because I think there's been some things getting lost in all the rhetoric and vitriol and hyperbole over the last couple of days. The president also said we're going to do everything we can to help Israel defend itself, and obviously they're defending themselves primarily against the threat of Hamas. We have never, ever, ever told them that they can't try to finish off the Hamas battalions that are in Rafah. We've never told them they can't operate in Rafah. What we've told them is that the way they do it matters, and that we won't support a major ground operation, an invasion, smashing into Rafah with multiple divisions of forces in a ham-fisted, indiscriminate way. And I think it's perfectly understandable why we wouldn't support that kind of or series of maneuvers against Hamas. But eliminating the threat of Hamas, absolutely, they have every right to do that, and they'll continue to have our support as they do that. Hamas continues to represent a truly genocidal threat against the Israeli people. You want to talk about genocidal intentions, it's on Hamas. And so we absolutely will continue to support them doing that. But we believe there's better ways to do that, to eliminate that threat, as you put it. We believe there's more discreet, more targeted, more careful ways to do it. And we are eagerly awaiting every opportunity we have to communicate those alternatives to the Israelis. We've already done that in a number of settings. We look forward to doing it in the future. Yesterday, in the end of my gaggle, at the end of my opening statement, I laid out a couple of ways in which we can and are willing to look at doing that in the future.
John Kirby, White House National Security Communications Advisor. He was also asked about a CNN article that quotes two Israeli whistleblowers and a Palestinian doctor held in a facility in the Negev, alleging abuse of detainees, blindfolded, handcuffed, beaten, forced to wear diapers. One whistleblower saying the beatings were not done to gather intelligence. They were done out of revenge. It was punishment for what the Palestinians did on October 7th and punishment for behavior in the camp. Here again is John Kirby.
We have seen these reports on potential, alleged prisoner abuse at this prison. It's deeply concerning, very troubling. We are reaching out to our Israeli counterparts to get more information here about these allegations. And obviously, our expectation is that we'll get good answers here. And that, of course, as would for any of our allies, our expectations are of the highest standard when it comes to the treatment of prisoners, regardless. But again, I don't want to get ahead of where we are. We're just now aware of these reports as well, and we're asking all the right questions about it.
White House spokesperson John Kirby. From Fox News, Congressman Cory Mills, Republican from Florida, is preparing impeachment articles against President Biden over his threat to halt U.S. offensive aid to Israel. The first-term lawmaker told Fox News Digital on Thursday. Mills accused Biden of forcing Israel into a quid pro quo situation by leveraging U.S. dollars against the Israeli government's actions in Gaza, drawing parallels to Democrats' first impeachment of former President Trump over his handling of Ukraine aid. That was from Fox News. Congressman Steve Scalise, Republican from Louisiana, the majority leader, was interviewed this morning on Fox News, talking about President Biden's position on weapons to Israel and those impeachment articles.
Yeah, I want to reverse it and ultimately deliver those weapons to Israel, as you pointed out, that they paid for over a year ago. This isn't something new. And so Joe Biden is continuing to cater to this anti-American, pro-Hamas wing of his party. I mean, think about this. When you see college campuses taking down the American flag, defacing George Washington's statue, those are the people that Joe Biden is trying to cater to right now by ultimately taking back and holding money and walking away from Israel. Republicans and Democrats alike support Israel and don't want Joe Biden to do this. And I think you're going to see action on the House floor to push back on it.
Republicans are drafting the articles of impeachment against President Biden. It was brought up by Cory Mills, Congressman Cory Mills, and he says this: the House has no choice but to impeach President quid pro Joe Biden, as Vice President Biden was caught threatening to withhold funding and aid to Ukraine unless they fired the Attorney General investigating Burisma. So he's saying the same thing happened in Ukraine. Now he's doing it to Israel by withholding weapons.
Yeah, and Joe Biden himself was critical of previous administrations. What he's doing is much worse.
You can impeach him for this?
If you look, well, what we're going to do is ultimately try to get Israel the weapons they need. We want to help Israel in their fight against Hamas. I don't know if Joe Biden's forgotten about it, but a terrorist organization backed by Iran, known as Hamas, invaded Israel, brutally murdered Israelis, is still holding over 130 hostages, including American citizens. Where is Joe Biden standing up to Hamas? He seems to want to go after Israel every single day and turn his back on our strongest ally in the Middle East. You're going to see strong bipartisan support for Israel in the Congress. We've shown it over and over again. Used to be unanimous. Unfortunately, there is a pro-Hamas wing of the Democrat Party that's taken over. And you see Joe Biden catering to that far-left element and turning away from Israel. Also, they're also sanctioning a lot of this anti-Semitism you're seeing on college campuses. Yeah. They're looking the other way towards anti-Semitism, which is a dangerous thing for our country or any country to allow.
The House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, Republican from Louisiana, on Fox News Channel this morning. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin spoke about the war between Israel and Hamas and Rafah and U.S. military aid in a news conference in Orangeburg, South Carolina, where he was giving the commencement address at South Carolina State University.
On Israel, you and other administration officials have repeatedly said that you're against any large-scale attack on Rafah unless Israel can provide a credible plan to protect civilians. But administration officials have also noted that Hamas deliberately embeds itself within civilian populations, using them as human shields. So are you able today to give us a specific idea of how Israel could possibly achieve a decisive, permanent victory over Hamas that would also meet your standards for protecting civilians? Do you believe that that's possible? And relatedly, Axios reports the Israeli Security Cabinet has approved an expansion of operations in Rafah. There are other reports the IDF has encircled eastern Rafah. And with the growing humanitarian concerns expressed across the Biden administration, would you still characterize this as a limited operation by Israel?
Yeah, so thanks, Matt. I think if the question is it possible to conduct effective operations and protect civilians? Absolutely, it's possible. We clearly believe that, and that's what we endeavor to do in any operation that we conduct. The Israeli military is a professional military, and again, they have the ability to do both of those. There have been far too many civilian casualties thus far. We would like to see that trend change. So that's really our focus. And in terms of how long that takes and when that happens, that'll be determined by the Israelis. But again, we want to see civilians that are in the battle space moved out of harm's way as they conduct those operations.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin at a news conference in Orangeburg, South Carolina, where he was giving a commencement address at historically black college. This is Washington Today. From CBS News, the Biden administration announced a new regulation Thursday aimed at allowing immigration officials to more quickly identify and deport migrants who are ineligible for U.S. asylum earlier in the process. The regulation by the Department of Homeland Security would apply to migrants who ask for asylum after crossing the U.S.-Mexico border illegally. At this point, as a proposed regulation, it must go through a public comment period before taking effect. It would instruct government asylum officers to apply certain barriers to asylum that are already part of U.S. law during so-called credible fear interviews, the first step in the years-long asylum process. Those who pass those interviews are allowed to seek asylum before an immigration judge, while those who fail them can be deported expeditiously. That was from CBS News. The U.S. House Judiciary Committee held a field hearing today on immigration and border security in Sahuarita, Arizona. Congressman Jim Jordan, Republican from Ohio, chairs the committee.
Imagine what is happening that Border Patrol doesn't know, or that this administration won't let agents tell us. Of course, do you know who else knows what is going on the border? The residents of the great state of Arizona know. And a few of them are here today to share how President Biden's open border policies negatively affected their communities and their lives. We will hear from a rancher who sees illegal aliens in camouflage on his land every day. We will hear from a mom whose family has been forever altered because President Biden refuses to prevent the Chinese government from teaming up with Mexican cartels to flood our country with fentanyl. We will hear from a Border Patrol chief who knows firsthand the disaster that President Biden's policies created on the southwest border and the negative effects that the open border has on agents' morale. And we will hear from a former sheriff's deputy about the dangerous condition President Biden's open border creates in communities all across Arizona. They all have different stories to tell, but they all agree that the border has never been as much of a dangerous disaster as it is today. It went from the most secure border in recent history to the most unsecure border in recent history in just a matter of days. And ultimately, only Joe Biden is responsible for that.
Congressman Jim Jordan, Republican from Ohio, chair of the Judiciary Committee, opening up today's field hearing in Arizona. Story from the Arizona Republic. Republicans amended a disputed ballot measure targeting illegal immigration Thursday as two powerful business groups joined the chorus of criticism against the legislation. House Concurrent Resolution 2060 is headed for passage on Republican Party lines, but would need approval by voters in November. It would make crossing the international border a state crime, allowing for state officials to deport border crossers, enhance penalties when fentanyl sales result in death, and boost verification of employees' immigration status. That from the Arizona Republic. Story from thehill.com. Barron Trump, the youngest son of former President Donald Trump, has declined the offer to serve as a delegate for Florida at this summer's Republican National Convention. Former First Lady Melania Trump's office said in a statement, while Barron is honored to have been chosen as a delegate by the Florida Republican Party, he regretfully declines to participate due to prior commitments. The Florida GOP earlier this week said that Barron Trump, who is 18, would join three of the former president's other children, Eric, Tiffany, and Donald Trump Jr., as delegates, with Eric Trump serving as the state's delegation chair. It would have marked Barron Trump's first foray into politics in the public spotlight. Barron Trump, who was 10 when his father was elected to the White House in 2016, was mostly kept out of the public spotlight while the former president was in office. He is the son of Donald and Melania Trump. Donald Trump said in a radio interview today that his youngest son has gotten into politics. That was from thehill.com. That interview was on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT in Philadelphia. Here's a minute of it.
I want to talk about your baby boy, Barron, who wants to jump into the political spectrum at such a young age. Have you been encouraging him? Have you given him advice? Have you told him how nasty the industry and the profession can be? What have you told Barron?
He's seen it. He doesn't have to hear. He's a smart one. He doesn't have to hear much. But he's a great guy. He's a little on the tall side, I will tell you. He's a tall one. But he's a good-looking guy, and he's really been a great student. And he does like politics. It's sort of funny. He'll tell me sometimes, Dad, this is what you have to do. So anyway, he's a good guy. He's a senior now in high school, and he'll be going to college.
Former President Donald Trump, a Republican presidential candidate this year, interviewed on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT in Philadelphia. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Hi, it's Kayla from C-SPAN. Imagine 45 years ago when there was just a handful of television networks. C-SPAN first went on the air bringing an unfiltered view of government directly to America's living rooms. No spin, no commentary, just pure democracy in action.
And it's Greta from C-SPAN. It was a bold experiment. We finally had a front row seat to Congress, the White House, and the campaign trail, all without government funding.
As we celebrate 45 years and a legacy of unfiltered access, we ask for your support of a donation in honor of our 4 decades of service. Your gift, no matter how big or small, will help maintain this vital resource for access to the democratic process.
You can help ensure another 45 years of witnessing history unfold and empowering citizens to be informed and engaged in the political process. Visit cspan.org/donate today and join our 45th anniversary campaign.
Thank you for supporting C-SPAN, your unfiltered view of government. Visit cspan.org/donate today to make your gift of support. Thank you.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. It's free and wherever you find your podcasts. From the New York Times, President Biden's top economic advisor said on Friday that lawmakers should take advantage of a looming tax debate next year to try to reduce budget deficits by sharply raising taxes on corporations and the rich. Under that plan, Mr. Biden would more than offset the cost of maintaining tax cuts for people earning $400,000 a year or less. In a speech to the Hamilton Project at the Brookings Institution in Washington, Lael Brainerd, who directs the White House National Economic Council, gave the most detailed explanation yet of how Mr. Biden would seek to shape what promises to be a multi-trillion-dollar tax debate. A batch of tax cuts signed into law in 2017 by former President Donald Trump, who's facing Mr. Biden in a rematch this fall, is set to expire at the end of next year. It includes cuts for individuals at all income levels. Republicans built that expiration into the tax bill to reduce its projected cost to deficits and comply with congressional rules. That was from the New York Times. Here is some of Lael Brainerd's speech.
Tax policy in 2025 should raise revenue consistent with the president's strong commitment to fiscal responsibility. At minimum, we should avoid making the fiscal hole created by Republican tax cuts deeper by fully paying for any tax cuts that are extended. And we should use the 2025 tax debate as an opportunity to raise revenue overall. The evidence is clear. Tax cuts don't pay for themselves. So it's past time to reject this argument that tax cuts uniquely shouldn't be offset. Since the TCJA was enacted, revenue as a share of GDP has averaged 17% of GDP compared to over 19% in the 5 years leading up to the Bush tax cuts. So the revenue share is going down at the very time we need revenue to go up to meet commitments on programs that are the bedrock of financial security for Americans. Our seniors earned their Social Security and Medicare benefits paycheck by paycheck. As the president has made clear, he rejects Republican efforts to cut those benefits or put health care and other programs that families count on at risk. Third, corporations that are making record profits should contribute their fair share. Does it make sense for corporations' share of tax responsibilities to be at multi-decade lows when corporate profits are very high? That question should be at the center of next year's tax debate.
Lael Brainerd is director of the White House National Economic Council, part of her speech at the Brookings Institution in Washington today. The Congressional Budget Office has just estimated that extending the 2017 tax cuts that expire at the end of 2025 would cost $4.6 trillion over 10 years. Congressman Jason Smith, Republican from Missouri, chair of the Ways and Means Committee, said on CNBC last week that the tax cuts should be extended.
At the end of 2025, every American will see a tax increase because more than $4 trillion worth of taxes will sunset December 31st, 2025. That includes the doubling of the child tax credit, which was $2,000, will be slashed into half to $1,000. The larger standard deduction, which the majority of Americans use when they file their taxes, will be more than cut in half. And the small business rate will approach over 40% after this sunset. So it's quite disturbing that you have the president doubling down once again that he will allow the Trump tax cuts to expire.
Congressman Jason Smith, he chairs the Ways and Means Committee. He also said on CNBC that most of those tax cuts did not go to the wealthy.
If you would look at my congressional district, which is one of the poorest congressional districts in the nation, working class Americans, median income households around $40,000 a year, under the Trump tax cuts, if a family of four makes less than $63,000 a year, they will pay zero in federal taxes. That's real tax relief. In fact, if you analyze the 2017 tax cuts, people who make less than $100,000 a year averaged a 16% cut on their taxes.
Congressman Jason Smith, Republican from Missouri, chaired the Ways and Means Committee in a CNBC interview. Wall Street today, the Dow up 125, Nasdaq down 5, S&P up 8. The Senate on Thursday night passed a 5-year, $100 billion Federal Aviation Administration reauthorization bill by a vote of 88-4. The 4 no votes were the senators from Maryland, Ben Cardin and Chris Van Hollen, and Virginia, Mark Warner and Tim Kaine, all Democrats, who objected to the inclusion in the bill of 5 more round-trip slots for Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. Senate also joined the House Thursday night in passing a 1-week extension of current FAA authorization because the current authorization would have expired tonight. The president has now signed that into law, and the new deadline is May 17th. After the vote Thursday night, the leaders of the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee spoke on the Senate floor, starting with the ranking Republican Ted Cruz of Texas.
Mr. President, I'm very pleased that the Senate has tonight passed this vital legislation. The House of Representatives should next week take it up and quickly pass it and send it to the President's desk for signature. This legislation is a strong, bipartisan, bicameral bill that includes hundreds of priorities for senators and representatives, both Republican and Democrat. This bill gives the FAA the safety tools it needs at a critical time to help bring new aerospace technologies to market. I want to take a moment to recognize the staff who has spent countless hours hammering out this legislation. This was no easy task. As I stated earlier, this bipartisan product was the result of many, many months of hard work, late nights. There were many times it appeared this bill was not going to make it over to the finish line, and the hard work of the staff is a big part of the reason we are where we are tonight.
Senator Ted Cruz, Republican from Texas, ranking member on the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. The chair, also speaking on the Senate floor, Maria Cantwell, Democrat from Washington State.
I, too, want to thank our colleagues for their hard work and their overwhelming support for the passage of this legislation. This legislation will now hopefully go to our House colleagues on the consent calendar on Tuesday, and then very shortly after that to the President's desk. This is historic, bipartisan, bicameral legislation that not only invests in the Federal Aviation Administration, but the National Safety Transportation Board for the next 5 years. It is a record reauthorization to make sure that our safety regulators and our safety investigators make aviation the safety gold standard of the world. This bill not only provides those authorizations, but I believe it gives consumers the right kind of refunds for tickets after 3 hours of delay. It also puts the right safety people on the job, both at our air traffic controller system and at the FAA oversight of manufacturers. By assuring that we have the safest aviation system in America, we are investing in our economy. Aviation contributes more than 5% to our GDP, $1.9 trillion of economic activity, and it supports over 11 million jobs. And if you ask me, the best way to the middle class is get an aviation job, coming in as working class, leaving as middle class, as many manufacturing jobs in my state represent. Our bill invests in the growth and well-being of that aviation workforce to try to continue to thrive by making education investments in controllers, machinists, engineers, mechanics, pilots, flight attendants, baggage handlers, maintenance workers, and all those that are the backbone of the aviation economy.
Senator Maria Cantwell, Democrat from Washington State, chair of the Commerce Committee on the Senate floor Thursday night before that vote, 88-4, to pass the 5-year FAA reauthorization bill. A press release put out by Senators Mark Warner and Tim Kaine, Democrats of Virginia, reads, "The Senate abdicated its responsibility to protect the safety of the 25 million people who fly through DCA every year. Just weeks after 2 aircraft nearly crashed into one another at DCA, this body refused to take up our common sense amendment to remove a dangerous provision that would have crammed more flights into the busiest runway in America. We even offered a compromise, another amendment that would have given the Secretary of Transportation the power to settle this matter after considering the implications more flights would have on delays and passenger safety. But some of our colleagues were too afraid to let the experts make the call. They didn't want to show the American people that they care more about a few lawmakers' desire for direct flights than they care about the safety and convenience of the traveling public. That is shameful and an embarrassment. The statement from Senators Mark Warner and Tim Kaine, Democrats of Virginia. The House is expected to debate and vote on this bill next week. It's possibly under expedited procedures that would not allow amendments. Sunday is Mother's Day. This week, the group Moms Rising Together held a news conference with the Democratic Women's Caucus on the grounds of the U.S. Capitol. A press release reads, "This Mother's Day, moms don't want just chocolate and flowers. They want care policies that actually deliver quality, affordable child care and elder care. They want their reproductive rights protected and much more." One of the speakers of the news conference, Congresswoman Teresa Leger Fernandez, Democrat from New Mexico.
Dia del Madre, how are you all? As we celebrate and come up upon celebrating Mother's Day, we seem to have some Republicans who forget that the best Mother's Day present would be to honor what mothers need. We need health care. We need child care. We need respect as women. This week, Republicans didn't deliver any of this. Instead, they are offering bills to give appliances more rights than women. They want to protect home appliances, but not women's reproductive health care. I represent New Mexico, and even though we are a poor state, we are offering women child care and reproductive health care. We are respecting women for Mother's Day. For example, in New Mexico, 20% of families, that's 42,581 families, are eligible for free child care under the state's Child Care Assistance Program. We did this by making sure that we increase the funds going to early child care and pre-K, because we know as mothers, we know that we invest in what we believe in, and we invest in our children. That's respecting a mother. In contrast, what are we seeing here? One of the worst things they've done is taken a sledgehammer and taken away women's reproductive health, and that means going directly at mothers-to-be, and those who choose not to be mothers, because we must respect all women. 184 House Republicans co-sponsored a bill that would make it harder for women to access IVF nationwide.
Congresswoman Teresa Leger Fernandez, Democrat from New Mexico, at a pre-Mother's Day news conference on Wednesday outside the U.S. Capitol. The news conference co-sponsored by the Democratic Women's Caucus and the group Moms Rising Together. At Senate GOP, the Senate Republican Conference account on X, posting today, Senator Katie Britt, Republican from Alabama, joined us on the Elephant in the Room podcast and talked all things motherhood, childcare, and family life. You don't want to miss it. Here's some of that podcast with Senator Britt talking about childcare reform legislation she's been working on.
I do have a unique voice. I mean, as the youngest Republican female ever elected to the U.S. Senate and the only Republican female with school-age kids in the whole Senate, there is one. Here she is. And, making sure that I'm unafraid to speak directly into issues like this, issues that I have just dealt with or issues that my sisters are dealing with. I mean, I have a sister that went through a very similar, she was up in the Northeast and childcare and how are we going to do this and how do we make it work? And now we have two. And then myself, how we did it and the struggles that kind of created and the cost and all of those things. So I have been working with one of my colleagues across the aisle and been working diligently on ways to figure out how do we support parents and obviously not create entitlement, but an encouragement
to have more kids too, for people to really build a family. I mean, I'm not there yet, but I'm thinking about it and I'm like, when are you financially ready if everything is so expensive?
That's exactly right.
And it's such a discouragement from people actually starting a family. And we do.
And also too, I have said I believe no child's zip code should determine their opportunity. But when you look at this and you look at, child care deserts, so to speak, and you look at the cost and all of these things, so we're trying to really drill down deep and figure out we don't want to just put a Band-Aid, what is the root cause? How do we start to approach this? So that's something that please, be on the lookout for that, because we will be rolling something out before too long, to where we really hope that we help parents. For those people who have the opportunity and want to stay home, I think it is just such a wonderful and incredible thing. For those men and women who do want to be able to, move into the workforce, we want to provide that pathway. So opportunity, and to your point earlier about workforce, and when how do we do these things? So we're looking at that right now, and I'm excited to be rolling something out that I think will be very effective.
Love a good teaser.
You got it.
I love it.
Senator Katie Britt, Republican from Alabama, on the Senate Republican Conference podcast latest episode. The podcast is named Elephant in the Room. USA Today reports that consumers are projected to spend the second highest on record for Mother's Day this year. According to new data from the National Retail Federation, consumers plan to spend $35.7 billion on Mother's Day this year, nearly $4 billion more than last year's record high of $31.7 billion, a record $274.02 per person on average, according to the annual survey. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter, word for word, and get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night and weekend.